I'm going to give you a view in terms of a little view into our business. I'll be honest, this is the first time we as a business have really openly spoken about anything that we're doing. We're a rapidly growing business. We're pretty protective about anything that we're doing because we're privately owned by venture capitalists mostly. But the reason I'm here is I think our business is growing up a little bit, and therefore we're actually reaching out a bit more. Okay. Okay, so in the next 30 minutes, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the inputs to creating this sort of 360 view. And I'm not just thinking 360 view in terms of single customer view. I'm thinking about the bigger picture. Just trying to, in our organization, Insight is about trying to create a truly helicopter view of the whole business, not just the consumer. Certainly the challenges that I've faced historically and seem to be facing here as well. The toolkit, some of the toolkit that we use, or some of the toolkit providers that we've tested or looked at or hope to work with in the future. A bit about us, talking about the skill set, and by that I mean people. Often the tools, the technology is always talked about, but the people using those tools aren't always talked about with so much sort of, I suppose, outward admiration in terms of actually how well they facilitate the toolkit working together. And we forget that it's a key part of it all. And then our approach, and I star the approach because, as I say, I'm talking about how we're beginning to do things, and also talking about some of the providers or suppliers that I've used in the past. So, how many of you actually know what Just Eat is? Okay. How many of those that put their hand up live outside London? Okay, fair enough. We're still heavily a London-centric company, or have been. What Just Eat is effectively a middleman for independent takeaways. So the way that, what happens is that independent takeaway delivery restaurants have orders placed online through our website, and then it is delivered direct by that restaurant to the customer. Okay, it's a simple business model. We're the world leader in it. We've got over 20,000 restaurants in 13 markets, and most of what we do is completely controlled by us. So we are truly a sales, marketing, operations, and technology company. Okay, even our call centre, for example, is based in the UK, in Boreham Wood, and all the technology that actually supports that is ours. So we have, so I said 20,000, I meant nearly 30,000 restaurants. We've got over 5 million registered users around the globe. We turn over for restaurants in the last 12 months about £400 million to independent takeaways. 700 employees, just over 1 million Facebook fans in those 13 markets. Okay, and growing pretty quickly. We're sort of almost real time as well in terms of e-commerce. There's a couple of minute period, but basically the customer orders online, they pay by card, or they can actually opt to pay cash on delivery. The restaurant then receives the order through a small in-restaurant terminal. They then confirm whether or not they're going to accept it and the time frame in which they're going to deliver it. And then the rest of the payment goes on to be actually taken, and then the order is delivered between sort of 20 and 40 minutes later. Okay. Those are the 13 markets that we're based in. We started way back in 2001 in Denmark, and it wasn't until way up here that we actually launched in the UK. They're still really our two biggest markets. UK is by far the biggest. But you can see the last 12 months has seen quite a busy period for us. 5 acquisitions in as many months, I think it was. But we still have the same old information challenges. It was mentioned that I was a consultant. I was actually a consultant to Just Eat before I joined Just Eat. The last 5-6 years, I've run my own data consultancy, and I kept waiting to arrive at a client where they actually had everything connected, they had everything joined up, and I was just going to be able to actually use it. And everywhere I kept going, regardless of how big those clients were, I kept finding the same challenges. And they exist here. Manipulating data to release its true value is obviously constantly a problem. Bridging those silos. Creating a single view for the customer. I'm not talking about a single customer view. Creating outwardly a single consistent view that the customer sees, regardless of where they get that content from. And trying to work out what is the essential pieces of data that are going to drive the business. Thing is, those things are pulling you that way, and pulling you back the other way are the departmental walls that even exist in businesses such as ours, the gatekeepers, sometimes the individual gatekeepers, the politics, and the out-and-out blockers. They seem to exist everywhere. Now, the question's been raised, can the only true or near 360 view actually reside in marketing? I don't necessarily believe that. I think it just actually depends on where the team with the greatest combined skill set and the broadest access to information happen to reside. I happen to reside under the marketing section of Just Eat. So therefore, in the future, the chances are marketing will therefore have the best view. Obviously, the business will as well. But I think it just depends on where the energy and the tools and the skills reside to actually create that. This, I hope you will acknowledge, is a common problem where you've got these Chinese walls. You often have this scenario. The overlap isn't always quite the same as that. But sales and marketing often are working relatively closely together. I would say in our organisation that overlap is 85 to 90%, in that sales genuinely are willing to be absolutely led by what we tell them to do, or what we suggest with the evidence they should strongly do. You often find this. Finance is sat on silos of information. Operations, certainly as obviously operations is vital to our business, and obviously the external agencies. I was at Marks & Spencer's in 1999 to 2001 when they were in exactly that scenario, where the agencies had a lot of the best information, but it was never actually sucked back into the business. And because of that, the Customer Insight Unit was formed, where I spent a couple of years. And then you obviously have all the information sat over here. That's what I think we're all aiming for. An alignment of sources, not just them all in the same place, but a proper alignment of sources. And then as near a complete view of all your data as possible. Now, we try and deploy a relatively varied but joined up toolkit as well. So now everyone has this sort of approach, but you have to lay something down that you can aim for. And often everyone's aiming for a very similar thing. So you're trying to put some sort of truly actionable insight in the end. And the reason I've added truly is because I think it needs to be simple. It needs to be easily understood. If we pass information to the sales team, we know if it's not in a very, very simple and obvious of value form, it just will sit there as a nice piece of visual information. And it will not find its way in their car or out with the sales presenter in front of the restaurants when trying to sign them up. Okay? So that's some of how we try to do all of that. Okay? There's a footnote at the bottom. Some of those suppliers shown are people that we are talking to, have worked with, or have the skill set built up in the business in order to deploy when we will need those tools in the future. Okay? But for example, in terms of centralising, the key thing here is obviously, from an insight point of view, is having access, direct access to the tools, not having to go to people to request data. We were in a situation ourselves last year where requests for data were taking 3 to 4 months for big chunks of data. Okay? Now we have direct access and our own version of the database. Okay. The reason these two here are specifically put between centralize and analyze, just centralizing doesn't mean your data's in a good position quality-wise. We have a lot of data cleaning to do. Okay, we are a business that's rapidly grown. The business has never been worried about what they're putting in the pot. They've just been worried about the pot is making the money. Okay, now, before we do the analytics, we have to go back and repair some of that damage that's already in the system. Okay. We use a whole range of tools, suppliers that you'll recognize. We try and use, obviously, as many of the tools like that are freely open source available. And again, we're actively looking for people that have those skills because it gives us an edge. We try to visualize the information as much as possible. We're a technology and sales and marketing-led business, but a lot of the people in the business have not been used to having information passed back to them. So the easiest way to get it, to accelerate that usage curve, is to make it simple. Okay? In terms of distribution, we have an internal wiki that we release information through. World meetings, webinars, masterclasses. We use a lot of infographics. Okay? I know they pop out all over the place, obviously on the web, often from a PR perspective, but we find them very useful to actually disseminate the learnings. So for example, that sort of thing is exactly what our sales team actually get. They don't get bar charts. They don't get just an Excel sheet. They actually get an infographic that they can then actually use on the iPad when they're out with the sales team to actually educate them about what's going on in their marketplace. Okay? So we have an in-house studio that are there to actually facilitate some of the insights and this 360 view coming to life visually. Okay. As well as having this varied toolkit, I think you also need complementary skills. I've always, it was mentioned about me having a hybrid skill base. Some people would spin that round and say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I truly believe nowadays data people need to be a hybrid, or you need at least one hybrid in every team. Because you can put a load of very smart thinkers into a room, but they also need to have complementary skills. So I'm trying to build up a team that has traditional data planning skills, knows how to list source, knows how to dedupe, knows what the difference between good and poor quality address data is. Okay? Blending skills, being able to take some TGI panel data, but some geodemographic data, some market research data, and squish it together and find the truth. Okay? Not just a market researcher, but actually, as soon as you give them a big amount of quantitative data, struggles to find the links between that and what they've been looking at on a very small panel of depth research. Fast insight, people that genuinely can just churn something out and actually direct a strategy to the recipient straight off the back of it. Coding. I'm amazed how many CVs I turn down, or people I turn down, because they say they're an expert Excel user, and when given the most basic task, they say, oh, well, I can't actually do that. I can't write a macro. I can't do VBA. Okay? A lot of the analysts I like are people that can actually create themselves. Okay? And understanding the segmentation, a good supplier knowledge. They know where to go and get information. Okay? And then also applied stats. Okay? Now, not all of them need that, but if each one in your team can cover at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those, then you build up, with very few people, a very broad spectrum of skills. Okay? So, what do I think are the vital inputs to creating this 360 view? Well, certainly an understanding of value and opportunity at customer level. Obviously, for us at restaurant level as well. One of the big challenges for us is understanding a lot, whether you, would you believe it or not, you won't be surprised, a lot of takeaways don't like telling us how much money they turn over. Because obviously a lot of these are businesses that are unregistered in many ways. They'd like to stay under the radar. And if we try and work out what our value to them is, that means that they've had to tell us how much their business is worth. And virtually none of our customers, our restaurants, will tell us that. Okay? So we need to try and find other ways of understanding what the value and opportunity of both our customers and restaurants are. Location is key for us. Remember, we are an online player, but we have retail constraints. Not everyone can come to our website and order takeaway. They can only order from where we have restaurants. Okay? There's always going to be a chunk of the population that cannot engage with us, even when we've got total coverage. Okay? So location, rurality, drive times, distance, road speeds, they actually play a huge part to us understanding that customer. Channels and devices. This is where I think the 360 attainment becomes problematic. The proliferation of channels, and particularly devices, trying to just keep ahead of that curve is such a problem. Okay? Consumers' connections, their networks, and obviously the influence that they have. We have those million Facebook fans are very, very influential for us. Sometimes positively, other times not. Unfortunately, the reason I had hoped to be at this event for the whole of the last 2 days. I've missed nearly all of it, unfortunately, which I'm particularly annoyed about. But we relaunched our brand at the weekend, and the positive and negative feedback that we've had, is both helpful and not helpful. But it's all content. The journey and behaviour. This is perhaps for us an area that we're accelerating in most. This is very easy, relatively easy for us to understand at customer level. Obviously, these, increasingly because we're a technology platform-based company, but this behavioural economics and understanding the journey is more difficult because we don't have a full view of the customer's purchasing behaviour, their preferences, and when you put all of that together, the biggest thing that we're finding most useful is this actually, trying to future-proof the answers that we're getting from all of those spaces. For us, we're almost in a position where we're creating, when we open up a restaurant in a new town, many of the consumers have never been able to order from their local takeaway hero online. So we're creating the market in the town when we arrive. So therefore, trying to assess who would consider ordering online or who says that they would like to order online is almost nonsensical because in many areas, people don't know it's even possible. So we have to find ways of blending all of this together to try and create our own future-proof view of how big our market is actually going to be in the next couple of years. Because obviously for us, the key thing there is if we can make sure we accurately size that market, when we're out raising more funds for expansion, it's much easier to do that. So we've got the flexible toolkit, and we've got, very importantly, that blending of skills, because that's how you actually get the value out of all of the data coming together, the people, ultimately. Okay? But it's about building a strong framework in the business as well. Make sure you've got an accessible repository of data. Now, I've only just, after 9 months in the business, really beginning to leverage real change here. Okay? Because IT were the holders of that data when I arrived in the business. Okay? Have a fast response approach. Get smart thinkers as your analysts. Just people that have a skill in a particular silo. They have to be very smart lateral thinkers that can bring data together quickly and are willing to do the 80% is good enough if it's in 10% of the time. Okay? Data assets. We're trying to build our own data assets. The challenge for us is obviously understanding the scale of our market and also even down to the number of takeaway restaurants that exist in any country. That data often doesn't exist anywhere. Okay? So we have to go and create it, crowdsourcing. Okay? Routes like that. But those then become data assets that help value our company. Okay? The broad skills we've talked about. Have a flexible toolkit. Create an internal hunger. If you make lots of simple, easy-to-consume insights and start sprinkling them around the business, you actually start to create your own pipeline of work. Okay? Within 6 months, we've created an environment where the business actually wants to come and ask stuff. We're not having to go out there and say, pose a hypothesis to sales. What would be helpful if we did this for you? Would that be of value? They're actually coming to us again. We want some of this, please. Okay? But to get that, you have to get your peer buy-in. Okay? Share your roadmaps. It's a really simple thing, but one of the easiest things we found that actually creates the connectivity is just go right to the source of all the key product and project development in the company and look at those roadmaps and overlay them and see what's about to come. See where things are about to reach a critical point where you can actually do something you haven't been able to do before. Connect your analysts. We have an analytics and insight group. That isn't the global insight team. That is anyone with an analytical role, whether they be in accounts, operations, BI, insight, marketing. We just bring them together once every quarter and just basically spend a day upskilling each other, okay? Often, obviously, my team end up walking away having learned only a couple of things compared to some of the more junior people in the other departments. But the key thing for us is that in the weeks and months after that, we end up getting much more useful information passed through to us because they're able to actually go back and generate some useful insights and data in their own departments. And then have a can-do attitude. And this comes back to the smart thinkers, people that actually just are proactively going off and doing things and creating them themselves. So if you can create an environment in which information is understood, utilized, and most importantly, proactively sought, then it does make things move very quickly. Okay? We still have these challenges, though. We have an insight roadmap, which is all about improving connectivity, updatability, tracking, huge improvements in visualization, data recency, and skill development. But going the other way is a constantly evolving environment. Time is always against us. The pace of change in our business. As I said, we added 5 businesses in 5 months. We double virtually every 12 months. This year, we will have gone from a new office that had space for twice as many people to almost outgrowing that and needing another office. That brings with it problems in itself. Okay? More devices, more channels, as I've mentioned. Priority change. One of the biggest problems that I face is just constantly the stop that project that you're 80% through and now focus on this one instead. And there's an awful lot of valuable insight that, unfortunately, almost goes out of date before it even arrives. But that's the nature of being in a business such as Just Eat, unfortunately. That element doesn't always exist in more mature businesses. It's a nice problem to have, let's put it that way. The skills gap. I still find that there are skills that I just cannot locate, even in the current marketplace. Hidden dangers. This is the old thing about opening up a can of worms. When you actually start to lift the engine of a business that hasn't really structured itself to have good, clean, usable data, then you start uncovering all sorts of nasties. And because you uncover them, you then have to deal with them. And sector unknowns. For us, as I say, that even the big market research agencies, the global market research agencies, struggle to size our business. So if they struggle to size it, how on earth are we going to achieve it? But we have to, because if we want to go out to finance institutions and raise funds, we have to be able to have a clear, sizable opportunity out there for us. So, in summary, it's a constant balancing act for us, just as it is, I think, probably still in most organisations. As I say, I expected over 5-6 years of consultancy to arrive one day somewhere where it did exist. And I never actually really found it. It's constantly frustrations and enlightenment balancing act. But every day, we do get a bit closer to that 360 view, and perhaps we should just be aiming for 330, 340, because the remainder will always, I think, be out of reach. But as long as we every day focus on trying to close down the gaps that are left, and importantly pick off the gaps that are going to drive most value back into the business, then if we do it one degree at a time, I think we'll get there.